A few days can change a person's life forever. For me, it was the day my father, James, passed away unexpectedly at the age of 55. My father wasn't the type to share his thoughts much, and he certainly never flaunted his money. So, when his will was read, my mother Amy, my sister Kelly, and I were in shock. The lawyer revealed that my father had left behind $100 million, an amount we could have never imagined. As the oldest child, I had always assumed I would take over my father's small business, maybe just continue his work quietly. But his will not only showed his hidden wealth, but also divided it in a way that none of us could understand. Kelly and I received much more than our mother did, and that revelation brought chaos into our lives. My mother Amy, 50 at the time, was crushed. She couldn't comprehend how her husband of 25 years had amassed so much money without her knowing. And the way he chose to divide it, it just made no sense. She felt betrayed, like she had been excluded from a life she had always been a part of. Her heartbreak soon turned into anger and doubt. She began questioning whether the will was even real, feeling like her life had been built on lies. The foundation of trust and security she'd relied on was suddenly crumbling. Kelly, who was 28, reacted differently. She remained strangely calm throughout it all. It seemed like she knew more about my father's plans than she was letting on, and her serenity only deepened the divide between her and our mother. I was caught in the middle, torn between my mother's disbelief and Kelly's composure. It made me question everything I knew about my father. Why had he kept these secrets from us? Why had he divided his wealth in such an unusual way? Instead of feeling grateful for the inheritance, it felt like a curse, something that was going to break our family apart. Soon, our home, once filled with love and warmth, became a battleground of secrets, accusations, and shifting loyalties. My mother decided to challenge the will in court, convinced that something wasn't right. The lawyer, Mr. Charles, who had handled my father's affairs, tried to mediate, but it was clear that the situation was spiraling out of control. Amy's grief had turned into a need for answers. She wanted to know why her husband had kept so much from her. It was not just about the money. It was about understanding why he had chosen to leave her with so little. Kelly, on the other hand, was adamant that our father's wishes should be honored. She argued that he had every right to divide his wealth as he saw fit. It was clear she believed there was more to his decision than what appeared on the surface. Her calmness and unwavering stance made things between her and our mother worse. Family gatherings that once brought us together were now tense and awkward. It felt like everything we had once shared was disappearing in front of us. The courtroom sessions became a grueling ordeal for all of us. It felt as though our entire lives were being dissected and examined by strangers. Every secret, every hidden detail, was put on display. The media caught wind of the story, adding even more pressure to our already strained relationships. Reporters began digging into my father's past, uncovering investments and business deals that none of us knew about. My father's quiet and simple persona was shattered, replaced by the image of a man who had lived a double life. Mr. Charles did his best to keep things steady. He was more than just a lawyer. He became a confidant, someone who tried to understand our pain and help us navigate through it. He knew that this was about more than just money. It was about a grieving family trying to make sense of a man they thought they knew. He organized meetings, hoping we could come to some kind of agreement without dragging things out in court. But each meeting only seemed to deepen the divide. My mother felt betrayed, Kelly seemed distant, and I was just trying to hold everything together. It wasn't long before the arguments got worse. My mother was convinced that the will was a fake, or that my father had been manipulated when he wrote it. Kelly became defensive, insisting that our father had been of sound mind and that challenging his wishes was disrespectful to his memory. Every conversation turned into a fight. It was like we were living in a nightmare, and no one knew how to wake up. The media attention made everything even harder. Our personal struggles were now public, and it seemed like everyone had an opinion. Reporters painted our family as greedy, broken by wealth that had come out of nowhere. The pressure from the outside world only made the fractures within our family deeper. My mother stopped going out, unwilling to face the questions and the stares. Kelly became more and more withdrawn, and I felt like I was losing both of them. Then there was a new discovery, something that made everything even more complicated. The forensic accountants brought in by Mr. Charles found additional hidden assets, investments, and offshore accounts. The $100 million was just part of a much larger fortune. The shock was overwhelming. My father had lived a life filled with secrets, and each new piece of information only made us question who he really was. Why had he hidden so much? And from whom was he hiding it? The discovery of these additional assets turned everything upside down. It felt like every time we were starting to get a grip on the situation, something else would come along and rip it out of our hands. My mother, already suspicious and hurt, saw this as even more proof of betrayal. Kelly saw it differently. She believed it was all part of our father's plan, that he had reasons for everything he did, and that it was up to us to honor his wishes. For me, it felt like I was being torn apart. On one side was my mother, desperate for answers and for a sense of justice. On the other side was Kelly, determined to follow the path our father had set out, no matter how mysterious it seemed. I tried to mediate, tried to find some middle ground, but it felt like I was failing at every turn. The more I tried to bring us together, the more it seemed like we were drifting apart. Mr. Charles suggested that we try to negotiate a settlement, especially given the newly discovered assets. He believed it might be a way for us to avoid a prolonged legal battle and begin to heal. But every attempt at negotiation ended in disaster. My mother refused to back down, convinced that she had been wronged. Kelly refused to compromise, believing that any change would dishonor our father's memory. The tension was unbearable, and it seemed like there was no end in sight. As the court case continued, the testimonies became more emotional, more personal. My mother spoke about her life with my father, about how she had trusted him, how she had never imagined that he was hiding so much from her. Her pain was evident, and it broke my heart to see her like that. Kelly, when she took the stand, was calm and composed. She defended our father, speaking about his intentions, about how he had always been a thoughtful and deliberate man. She believed that everything he had done had a purpose, even if we couldn't understand it. When it was my turn to speak, I tried to bridge the gap. I spoke about the father I knew, a man who had loved us, who had worked hard, who had tried to provide for his family. I spoke about the confusion and pain that his secrets had caused, about the way his hidden wealth had turned our lives upside down. I tried to make it clear that we needed to find a way to move forward, that we needed to find a solution that honored his memory without destroying what was left of our family. But the court was not the place for healing. It was a place of arguments, of legal strategies, of winners and losers. The judge listened patiently, but it was clear that no matter what decision was made, our family would never be the same. The final verdict came after months of legal battles. The judge decided on a compromise. My mother would receive a larger portion of the estate, recognizing her role in my father's life and the unfairness of her being left out. Kelly and I would also receive significant shares, but there were conditions to ensure that the wealth was managed responsibly. In addition to the division of assets, the judge ordered that we attend family counseling. It was an attempt to address the deep emotional wounds that had been laid bare during the trial. It was a recognition that the issues we were facing weren't just about money. They were about trust, about love, about the bonds that held us together as a family. As we left the courtroom that day, there was no celebration, no feeling of victory. There was only a quiet sense of exhaustion. The legal battle was over, but the real work was just beginning. We had to find a way to live with each other again, to rebuild what had been broken. The counseling sessions were difficult at first. We were all so used to seeing each other as adversaries, as people on opposite sides of a fight. But slowly, we began to talk, really talk. We began to share our fears, our regrets, our hopes for the future. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of setbacks, but it was a start. Kelly and I began working together on charitable projects, using part of the inheritance to support causes that mattered to us. It was a way to honor our father's memory, to use his wealth for something good. It also gave us a sense of purpose, a way to reconnect with each other outside of the context of the will and the legal battles. My mother, too, began to find her own path. she focused on rebuilding her life, on finding a new sense of independence. It wasn't the life she had imagined for herself, but it was a life that she was determined to make her own. Looking back, I realized that the inheritance was never really about the money. It was about the secrets that had been kept, the trust that had been broken, the love that had been tested. It was about a family trying to find its way through the darkness, trying to hold on to what mattered most. My father's hidden wealth had brought us pain, but it had also forced us to confront the truths we had been avoiding. It had made us stronger, in a strange and difficult way. The legacy my father left behind was complicated. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the lessons we learned, the bonds we rebuilt, the new traditions we created. It was about the hope that despite everything, we could still be a family. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were moving in the right direction. And that, more than anything else, was what my father would have wanted.